Allan's briefed us that we have to provide punchy answers. I'm desperately trying to think of a punchy way of answering this particular question. But I mean, I think the crux of the matter is whether or not you believe that the financial crisis that hit Scotland and the rest of the world in 2008 represented the end of something. I do, and I certainly hope it represented the end of something. What did it represent the end of? A period of deregulated financial capitalism, one that had very modest benefits in terms of GDP and productivity growth, but one that resulted in an exponential rise in income and wealth inequality and a rapid deterioration in social mobility. So I do not think the outcomes were good. So how do we move on from there? I think we have to recognise that a number of the very big issues that have to be dealt with, including financial reform, reside at UK level. But certainly my aspiration is at Scottish level is that the targets that have been mentioned on solidarity, cohesion and sustainability become far more prominent in the debate about how we generate economic growth going forward. Recognising that, yes, we all want more economic growth, but if that growth is going to be stable, if it's going to be fairly distributed amongst the people who generate that growth, then we have to see some massive changes to the way we organise our economy. If we don't, we're going to be left with an economy that's not just less fair and less democratic, but will be more unstable, will be more prone to systemic crisis. We cannot continue the situation of the last 30 years where wages continue to decline as a percentage of GDP while profits continue to go up. In terms of answering your question, and I think it's very crucial background, but in terms of the broad strategy, sectoral-based strategy, I'm quite comfortable with. I would like to see the Scottish Government be far more proactive in looking at cross-cutting issues, particularly around about manufacturing. Now, everybody wants more manufacturing exports at this moment in time, but looking about how we can work across sectors in Scotland to address real issues like skills procurement has been discussed a lot today, to sustain and grow manufacturing into the future, I think will be really vital. Sorry, not particularly punchy.
No, that's good. It can be different as well as punchy. So I get that. Thank you much for that. Can I come back? Do you want to say something?
Well, you said be different, so I will be. I mean, Chris has been involved in evaluations of the Town Centre Regeneration Fund, and Stephen mentioned retail, and Laurie mentioned the economy and the social aspects. Anybody who knows me, my interest is in town centres and local high streets. I think that covers retail, the economy, social aspects, social enterprises, all sorts of different things. It also impacts on the Scottish Government's outcomes in various sectors. So whilst I've got broad agreement with the economic strategy, I think what we've seen over the past couple of years is a bit of tinkering at the edges in terms of the Town Centre Regeneration Fund, the idea of the large retailer tax. We've seen some tinkering around the edges in terms of trying to stimulate investment in town centres. And I think in detail what I'd like to see from the economic strategy is more detail and more cohesive policy framework for town centres and driving investment to the town centres, because they do impact, across society in Scotland.
Thanks so much. Can I hang on in there a little bit? Stephen Boyle was saying that research by McGregor suggested that sectoral policy can be a waste of time. Is that in a nutshell, Stephen?
It's a fair summary.
Can I turn that around and ask a question of Julian in the first instance? I know Julie's really space up that point. Julian, so tell me, how much purchase has sectoral policy had in Scotland on the kinds of sectors that we currently have in Scotland? What would you just on that?
I think it's different by sector. I think what sectors are just sectors are just a lens to help you look through and understand the economy a bit better. So something like life science, what that has taught us is the relationship between the public and the private sector, and the competitive advantage we've achieved in Scotland through life science has been a combination of the investment of a number of very successful companies, many of them coming from abroad, but importantly underpinned by investment in education, in the health service, and really kind of quirky things like having cradle-to-grave health records. That has been the basis of success of companies like Wyeth, now Pfizer, coming to Scotland. So that is an important element of where a sector policy or sector approach has brought added value and wealth to Scotland. There are similar stories that play out by each sector. So the regulatory environment and the legislative environment around renewable energy is the foundation, but not the only driver of success in renewables. So each sector, I say, if you see it as a lens to help you understand how collaboratively public and private sector can work together to achieve growth, then I don't think it's not a panacea, but it makes smarter investment choices, which lead on not just to economic development actors, but also those that support, whether it's the provision of skills or whether it's the provision of, and take it right back to procurement. What we're learning, health service procurement can actually be an incredible driver for economic growth. Now, historically in Scotland, we've actually got that wrong. Companies can sell to the Italian health service, but they can't sell to the Scottish health service. But at last, government has started to see some of the opportunities across the board, so reinforcing public policy. Not a panacea, but just a lens to help see that through. Finally, what we're also learning, and someone earlier on sort of almost dismissed the geographic focus. I think what sectors help us understand is the geography of economics. So thank goodness our ports are on the coast, but understanding that has enabled us to...
People are starting to do the system of canals and what you do it inland.
What we're able to see, though, is investment opportunities to support offshore renewables investment around Leith, around Dundee, around Fife Energy Park. They are where they are, so if we can invest in them and exploit them. But that sector lens has helped us define policy, and when I say us, I mean collectively, all of us.
Very quickly, I mean, I sit in 3 industry advisory boards in Scotland for energy, for textiles and for aerospace, defence and marine. I mean, I think the work that's been done through the Energy Advisory Board involving Scottish Enterprise, Skills Development Scotland, etc., has been pivotal in generating some of the big inward investments we've seen over the last year. Would those investments have happened anyway? Who knows, but I certainly don't think from speaking to employers within the sector they would have been certainly happened at the pace and scale they've happened over the last year. Textiles, you look back a few years ago, the industry was on its knees in Scotland, and I know from sitting around the table with employers in that sector, I mean, they really didn't see a way out of this at all. You know, they were minimum wage employers and still wanted to compete on price with the likes of China's of this world, and I think the challenge function that was provided by Scottish Enterprise and other public agencies to that sector has been absolutely fundamental in turning it around, and it is increasingly healthy at this moment in time. Aerospace, defence and marine, well, I mean, given that public contracts are so overwhelmingly the major issue in that sector, has it been quite as important having that sectoral approach? Probably not, but I think some of the longer term skills issues now been addressed through that sector, I think will undoubtedly help sustain it into the future. So, you know, absolutely accept, you know, Nick Craft's understand as a, you know, a very decent economist indeed, you know, and I'm sure that research I've not had the chance to read is pretty compelling. But yeah, but in terms of what's happening in Scotland at this moment in time, I do see the sector-based approach bearing fruit day and daily.
Okay, any contributions to the floor on sectors? Liz?
Sorry. Liz McEntee from Glasgow Council for the Voluntary Sector. Very funny. What will it take? I'd like to come back to Laurie's point and just pick up on the point about social enterprise. What do the panel think it will take to turn the political rhetoric that Laurie described around the value and contribution of the third sector and social enterprise into reality? And how can this sector achieve what, obviously I'm going to view, but I'm sure others in the room will as well, achieve really kind of more visibility and definitely kind of an overdue parity of recognition in terms of what it contributes to Scotland's economy?
Good question. Liz is very good in the microphone, just to sing in a band, is that right? Yes, Bruce. Laurie, you want to go first on that one?
One of the recent breakthroughs for us was that Scottish Enterprise recognised us as a growth company, no matter whether we're a social enterprise, no matter what sector we worked in, on the basis of their analysis of our business strategy and where we were and what we were doing. And I think that, I was going to say we didn't get a huge amount out of it. We're still working with them, but I don't mean it that in the wrong way. I mean it in the sense that I think it was a psychological breakthrough, because I think it was the main economic development agency in Scotland and the government agency recognising that social enterprise is just like any other company in the way they look at it. Although, you know, we have a social impact that other companies may not look at. Secondly, I think the support from central government in Scotland has been superb in the last few years, and I think will grow in the next few years. I think people from outside Scotland look in Scotland as probably one of the best countries for social enterprise in the world, because there are cultural things about Scotland that mean that I think a lot of people are interested in both being entrepreneurial and having a social impact, both from the private sector and public sector. And I think the political support and government support we've had has led the way for other countries. to look at our models and look at repeating them. And that's been the right kind of support. It's been some financial support, it's been business support, mentoring, etc. I think one of the dangers for us is over-promising and under-delivering, because I think there are opportunities in some sectors. Health is probably where we're poorer compared to south of the border. In a lot of other areas, I think we do lead the way. But we're not going to be the answer to everything by any means. But yes, we could do more, and potentially our profile could be higher. But we've got to be able to have the impact, measure the impact, and demonstrate the impact that we have. And I don't think we've been particularly good at a sector at doing that. We're getting better, but we need to do more work in demonstrating the real value that we can provide to communities and individuals and families in Scotland.
Yes, just briefly, I think one measure of the, or rather one means of achieving the objective that the questioner outlines is to attract more private investment. And we've done quite a bit of, we've had quite a lot of discussion anyway, with not only with the coalition, but also with some other social enterprise organisations. And I think developing the kind of impact metrics around, I mean, there's a very well-quoted example, which I won't go into detail on, but I'm sure you're all familiar with it, of an enterprise which actually prevents people reoffending, and then you take into account the savings of the public person, and that kind of social impact investing. And I think unlocking that connection between investment and outcome, and describing it and explaining it in ways that investors can understand. I mean, this is not straightforward, because there are some some investors who have other duties to shareholders and others, so it's not a simple matter of just sort of appealing to people's better nature. But I do think the way in which we quantify and articulate the investment return is essential, actually, to getting that